Canada and the U.S. making inroads this Wednesday night on a possible trade deal. How much progress is being made, and when might a deal be finalized?
There'd be lots of questions if there isn't something that is announced.
As President Trump proclaims he's made a deal with China. The uproar over Trump's immigration raids.
To have people live in fear like it is today is just unacceptable.
The pressure to end them now. Warnings before heading out on the water. Timely advice after recent tragedies. Plus, remembering a visionary.
In my room.
The innovation and influence of legendary singer and songwriter Brian Wilson.
In my room.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There are hints Canada and the U.S. are moving closer to some kind of deal on trade. Last week, the government confirmed Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has been communicating directly with the U.S. president, but made it clear they're not going to negotiate in public. Today, the American ambassador to Canada signaled some progress is being made ahead of the two leaders meeting at the G7 summit in Alberta next week. And President Trump himself claims a trade deal with China is done. We'll go to Washington in just a moment, but we begin with David Akin in Ottawa and where things stand with Trump and a trade deal with Canada. David.
Yeah, Prime Minister Mark Carney and President Donald Trump have exchanged some documents with negotiating positions on security, tariffs, and trade, although sources are characterizing this as, pretty much the normal exchange of documents between two sides in a negotiation, and they really won't say anything more beyond that. Now, Global News has learned that the two sides are not yet ready to exchange a comprehensive draft agreement. Now, neither Carney nor Trump are speaking about this today, but the U.S. ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, acknowledged that Carney and Trump will certainly get asked about the state of negotiations when the two of them are together in Alberta next week for the G7 summit.
They were both going to be at the same place. They were both going to be in Canada. And, there'd be lots of questions if there isn't something that is announced.
David, on another matter, India's prime minister has been invited to the G7, though India is not part of the G7, and not everyone's happy about that. Many Sikh Canadians have concerns because of the murder of a Sikh activist in BC that's been linked to agents acting on behalf of the Indian government. How is the prime minister responding?
Well, this morning, he had a meeting with a Liberal MP from Surrey, Sukh Dhaliwal. And Dhaliwal and Carney met where Dhaliwal expressed his and his constituents' concerns about Modi's visit.
I'm saying that it's not a good idea, but now he's invited. We have to move forward, and we have to see our Prime Minister when it comes to, he is alarmed about the issues, and he will be very strong when it comes to dealing with those issues that are important to Canadians.
Now, meanwhile, the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, confirmed today he will have some one-on-one meetings with Carney here in Ottawa Friday and Saturday before the two men head to the G7 in Kananaskis on Sunday. And Brazil's president will also be coming to Alberta. Carney invited President Luiz Inácio da Silva to the summit when the two men had a phone call today, and Lula, as the president is better known, accepted. Donna.
Wow, lots of people beyond the G7. David Akin in Ottawa, thank you. President Trump broke his own news today about what he claims is a trade deal with China, declaring a deal with China is done. High-level trade officials from both China and the U.S. have been meeting in London, but details of what they have or have not agreed to are sketchy. Jackson Prosco is following this for us.
The apparent breakthrough between the world's two largest economies came after days of talks in London.
So the idea is we're going to go back and speak to President Trump and make sure he approves it. They are going to go back and speak to President Xi and make sure he approves it.
On social media, President Donald Trump proclaimed the deal with China is done and says it maintains the 55% tariffs on imports, with China imposing a 10% tariff on U.S. goods. In exchange, China will give the U.S. continued access to rare earth minerals, while the U.S. will back down on threats to target Chinese students on American campuses.
The president is talking to them about the details of it now, but what the president heard, he liked.
For now, it's more of a negotiating framework. Notably, those hefty tariffs are staying in place. The U.S. Treasury Secretary testified that's unlikely to change.
China has a singular opportunity to stabilize its economy by shifting away from excess production towards greater consumption. But the country needs to be a reliable partner in trade negotiations.
A deal that leaves tariffs in place remains troubling for both countries. The costs are passed on to American consumers in the form of higher prices, while reduced demand for goods is weighing heavily on China's economy.
The downward pressures are significant on China, and in that sense, there's a lot of incentive to come to the trade deal and somehow get these tariffs off.
Even if a deal is finalized soon, it may be too late to stop the damage. The World Bank warned global economic growth is on track for its weakest decade since the 1960s. Trump's trade war is a major factor weighing down economies worldwide. Donna?
Jackson, thanks. The mayor of Los Angeles says the unrest in her city has been provoked by the White House and that the bulk of people being detained in immigration roundups are everyday people looking for work, not criminals. The sweeps by federal agents, backed up by thousands of National Guards and Marines, have sparked days of protests and clashes. And tonight, the Trump administration is vowing to move ahead with it. Paul Johnson is in Los Angeles for us. Paul.
Donna, Los Angeles was quieter overnight. There were no reports of looting, though police did report having arrested more than 200 people, clearly taking advantage of that curfew rule that Mayor Bass enacted last night. The mayor today also challenged the federal government over whether these sweeps are actually targeting threats to public safety or just going after the low-hanging fruit.
Thank you, President Donald J. Trump, for securing our border, for deporting criminal illegal immigrants.
That's Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem touting the Trump administration's deportation sweeps as being a roundup of dangerous offenders. And on Wednesday, they released the profiles of 9 men picked up in the LA raids. They say among them were a murderer, a pedophile, and a drug trafficker.
Throughout the day, they brought more and more agents, about 50 trucks.
Antonio Hernandez witnessed the operation that happened near a Home Depot in Paramount. Down in the parking lot, we spoke to 3 men who turned up hoping to be hired for construction work. It didn't feel like any hotbed of criminality. And the men told us workers have been gathering in the region's Home Depots for many years. Normally, they say between 20 and 30 people would be here, but the community's been shaken up by the raids.
These aren't the criminals the administration is allegedly targeting. These are mothers and fathers, restaurant workers, seamstress, home care workers, everyday Angelenos trying to make a living.
Back in LA's Fashion District, where the first confrontation with ICE agents happened at a clothing warehouse, witnesses to that event described a similar situation. A peaceful and orderly place where people appear to have been arrested as they showed up to do legitimate work. By early afternoon Wednesday, demonstrators were back on the streets, this time in front of City Hall. That's where we met Ascension Torres.
I think one of the things that people are doing is taking a great big exhale.
Torres told us he's trying to encourage demonstrators to keep it peaceful, concerned that looting, vandalism, and attacks on police will only undermine their message, as the entire world right now is watching what's happening in LA. So as this story goes on, we're learning more about the controversial deployment by President Trump of thousands of soldiers to the city of Los Angeles. We have to say, we haven't seen any of the National Guard soldiers out and about in this city. They've been kept to guarding the federal building downtown, and even there, we've really never seen more than a couple of dozen of them. The other big controversy was the announcement that U.S. Marines would be coming here. We haven't seen any of them yet, and the latest word from the Pentagon is that they are still in, quote-unquote, pre-mission training. Donna?
Okay, Paul Johnson in L.A., thanks. Disgraced Hollywood movie producer Harvey Weinstein has been found guilty of sexual assault in New York after his sex crimes conviction in the state was overturned last year. A jury found him guilty on 1 count of committing a criminal sexual act in the first degree. Weinstein was acquitted of a second sexual assault charge, and jurors have been unable to reach a verdict on a third charge. The judge has advised them to continue deliberations. Alberta's premier wants to make her province an energy superpower, and Danielle Smith wants to entice a private company to build a pipeline from Alberta to BC's north coast. Prime Minister Mark Carney recently met with provincial and territorial premiers to hear what projects they'd like to see fast-tracked under new legislation. Though, as Heather West explains, a new pipeline is far from a sure bet.
The world needs more abundant, affordable, and reliable energy.
As the Global Energy Show's Day 2 keynote speaker, Alberta's premier was eager to make a pitch.
We need significantly more infrastructure to make the most of Alberta's potential and to meet international demand.
At the top of Smith's list, a 42-inch bitumen pipeline connecting Alberta to tidewater at the port of Prince Rupert in BC. Essential, she says, if Alberta wants to take advantage of what OPEC told the crowd Tuesday will be a 24% jump in global oil demand over the next 25 years.
Our projections are that oil demand will go and surpass 120 million barrels a day by 2050. Simply put, ladies and gentlemen, there is no peak in oil demand on the horizon.
On the floor of this international trade show, Canada's industry appears ready to boom like never before. Unless, of course, it's not.
There are plenty of other forecasters and agencies and firms who have very different results. The International Energy Agency calls for peak oil demand in 2030, and then depending on which scenario you favor, it could either be a plateau out to 2050 or it could start dropping.
Which makes investing in a new pipeline a significant risk. Part of the reason the BC government is not on side.
I'm not the one who stands between Premier Smith and a pipeline to the coast. There's no proponent, there's no money, there's no project right now.
We know that it's a chicken and egg problem, that no one's going to come forward with a project without some guarantee that's going to be approved.
Which, according to this former energy executive, will depend on federal policies like the emissions cap and BC tanker ban coming off the books.
If the project is economically sound, you probably will have people competing for the chance to do this project.
A lot of ifs, making another Alberta pipeline an ambitious goal, but maybe not an impossible one. Heather West, Global News, Calgary.
The federal government's latest housing plan could save some first-time homebuyers roughly $27,000 in sales tax on the price of a newly built home. The federal portion of sales tax would be eliminated on a new home worth up to $1 million. The Parliamentary Budget Office predicts over 71,000 new builds would qualify for GST relief over the lifetime of the program. The GST rebate, which is not yet law, was included in the Liberals' spring election platform. The PBO forecasts the program will cost $1.9 billion over 6 years. On high alert, coming up, the out-of-control wildfire threatening homes in Squamish, BC. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe is promising $500 in new aid for each of the more than 10,000 fire evacuees in that province.
These funds are going to help support families not only through their evacuated time, but going to help support them as they encounter the costs of returning to their home community.
It's been 2 weeks since Saskatchewan declared a state of emergency because of wildfires. An evacuation order for about 7,000 people in the L'Orange area is expected to be rescinded tomorrow morning. And in neighboring Manitoba, 21,000 people are still out of their homes. And with fires also burning in northern Alberta and BC, smoke is now a major problem. The air quality index across much of the prairies was at 10 plus today, the highest alert level. Between Vancouver and Whistler, a wildfire has quadrupled in size. People living on the outskirts of Squamish BC are on evacuation alert, with the fire just 40 meters from some homes. Neetu Garcha is there as the fire situation heats up in southwestern BC. Neetu.
Donna, smoke is rising from the mountainside here near Squamish as a thick haze blankets parts of this community. Crews on the ground and in the air are working to contain the wildfire, which officials say has quadrupled in size, with the latest mapping at 20 hectares, up from 5 hectares on Tuesday.
We're on alert, yeah. So bags are packed and ready to go.
At least 200 properties have been put on evacuation alert. There's a campground in the area that's been cleared and a school that has told students to stay home because of the nearby flames. With the forecast calling for up to 40-kilometer-per-hour wind gusts in the coming days, some residents have already left their home out of an abundance of caution, as others have placed sprinklers on their roof. Squamish Nation is working to identify potential risks to sacred Indigenous cultural sites. Water restrictions and a campfire ban are in place. Officials are reassuring residents they're in a good position to protect properties because of the humidity and sprinkler systems being deployed by expert crews on the ground. Officials say debris from falling trees has come within about 40 meters of homes.
It's always a concern when you have debris falling down steep hillsides. We do have a great team of firefighters working at structural protection around the homes.
For the rest of the community, we're safe at this point, and the challenges are very localized.
Investigating RCMP say the fire was human-caused and are asking anybody who was hiking in the area when it was first spotted on Monday afternoon to contact them. Donna?
All right, Neetu Garcha in Squamish, BC, thanks. Still ahead, how you and your children can stay safe in the water this summer. A Montreal family is in mourning after a mother and her 3-year-old son drowned in a backyard swimming pool. They are the third and fourth drownings in Canada in less than a week. And as Dan Spector reports, it's highlighting the importance of water safety ahead of a busy summer swimming season.
It is an awful family tragedy. A 34-year-old mother and her 3-year-old son both drowned in this backyard pool in Montreal on Tuesday night. Responders rushed to the home, but they could not be resuscitated. Police are calling the two deaths a tragic accident.
It's very sad, and it's also one of those things that's just 100% preventable.
With sunny, warm weather finally here, Leanne Franzblow says the Montreal Children's Hospital has already treated a handful of drowning cases.
Everybody should be taking swimming lessons.
It's been a deadly start to June on Canadian waters. At Montreal's Verdun Beach on Sunday, a 20-year-old man vanished into the St. Lawrence River. That same day on Sturgeon Lake, a few hours north of Toronto, 2 men in their 50s drowned when their canoe capsized. There were no life jackets on the boat.
Yeah, it's not fun. I mean, they prefer to have all their liberty of movement. But today, the life jackets are better than ever. They are small and easy to wear.
Meanwhile, a Vancouver family is also in immeasurable grief after this 10-year-old boy was killed when a speedboat hit him and another child while they were tubing. Police are investigating whether speed and alcohol were factors. José Côté says speeding is generally more common when boat drivers have been drinking.
With the sun, with the wind, with the tiredness, you're tired. You don't realize that, but it affects your reflex. It affects your judgment more than when you are not on the water.
At backyard pools, experts say to make sure fencing is secure, allowing no direct access from homes. No one should swim alone, and someone must always be supervising children. Though numbers have dropped in recent decades, there are still about 450 drownings per year in Canada. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
He wrote some of the most legendary sounds of summer, remembering the incredible highs and devastating lows of Brian Wilson's life. That's next. Few artists captured a vibe the way Brian Wilson did. He wasn't a surfer himself, but from the beginning, the songs he wrote for the Beach Boys captured 1960s California and were wildly successful. In a post shared on Instagram, his family revealed Wilson has died at the age of 82. "We are at a loss for words right now," they wrote. "We realize that we are sharing our grief with the world." In recent months, Wilson had been dealing with a neurocognitive disorder and was taking medication for dementia. Eric Sorensen looks at the legacy he leaves.
Let's go surfing now, everybody's learning how.
The moment this song hit the airwaves, the Beach Boys went from a local garage band to international sensation.
If everybody had an ocean across the USA.
Soon it was one #1 hit after another. The lyrics and harmonies glamorizing California surf and sand were the creative genius of Brian Wilson, one of three brothers in the Beach Boys, but there was more. Wilson began to explore more complex relationships, the themes of love and loss.
Mike and the guys didn't like it. They thought it was like too advanced music. They wanted to keep making car songs and surf songs. I said, guys, we gotta grow.
And so they did on the historic album Pet Sounds.
I may not always love you, but long as there are stars above you.
The Beach Boys were America's answer to the British invasion led by the Beatles, but even Paul McCartney acknowledged Wilson's influence.
For everything you've done for me, for making me cry, for having that thing you can do with your music. You just put those notes, those harmonies together.
But Wilson was also ravaged by drug abuse.
Round, round, get around, I get around.
The film Love and Mercy chronicled not just the group's rise to fame, but Wilson's spiral into mental illness.
I hear voices. Brian, time for your pills. Lying in bed, just like Brian Wilson did.
Stephen Page wrote that tribute to Brian Wilson with the Bare Naked Ladies in 1992.
His ability to express both light and dark in the same piece of music, those things really spoke to me. Brian Wilson was, I think, undeniably one of the most important musicians of modern times.
Later, suffering from dementia, Wilson's bandmates were gentle in their recollections.
Brian's such a mystery, but Brian's still Brian. He's still got that brain.
That brain, that genius.
God only knows what I'd be without you.
That is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. The Beach Boys were certainly part of the soundtrack of my childhood, and we thought we'd go out on my favorite tonight while showcasing tonight's Your Canada. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
I may not always love you, but long as there are stars above you, you never need to doubt it. I'll make you so sure about it. God only knows what I'd be without you.